Thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Scott Freeman with the Ouibache Music Festival in West Lafayette, Indiana, and this is our continuing music series, Introduction to Music, sponsored by the Tippecanoe Arts Federation and the Indiana Arts Commission through a grant that we received, and we were able to set up a series of musicians from around the country to come join us and introduce us to their craft. And joining us from New York is a good friend of mine I've known for actually quite a few years, and it's good to reconnect with him. Is according to his website, guitarist extraordinaire, Mr. Frank Vignola. Frank, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking me to be a part of this pretty cool series. So.
Yeah, it's been wonderfully successful to this point, and we're really thankful to you and to all of the musicians that came on board. What was really interesting about it, it was simply a phone call to you guys and just say, hey, what do you think? And every one of you said, we're in. You know, we are in.
I believe I said when you said, well, what day would be good? I said any day.
Any day. That's right.
Next May.
Yeah.
So I think you just picked the time and the day because obviously, had a lot of shows canceled. So it's fun to connect with people.
Yeah.
That's what we love to do as musicians, is be with people, share our gifts,
It is. Well, you're a musician, you're a composer, you're an arranger, a producer. You are an author, you are a guitarist and an award-winning banjo player, and I did not know that, so that's very cool. Share with us a little bit about how long have you been playing the guitar? How did this whole thing start with you? Where was the beginning point for Frank Vignola, and how did we get you to where we are today? We'll over the next hour or so, we'll sit and talk about that. But where did this whole journey begin?
Basically the year 1970, so 50 years ago, I started playing the ukulele. And my mother played a little guitar. My father played the tenor banjo. And that evolved into hearing, I remember kind of life starting with hearing a Django Reinhardt record. And I remember the exact one. It was Limehouse Blues, and it was... And my father showed me these chords, and I would sit there all day long and put that record on and play along. And that was kind of the start of my journey into music, and I knew from that moment that, wow, this is what I'm going to be doing with my life. And that's when I started studying guitar. I got a great guitar teacher at the age of 7. Went to a fabulous music school during high school to learn, proper theory and study classical guitar and analyze Bach and all those really cool things. And then when I was 18, I graduated high school and basically went on the road and played music. I was very fortunate to have a lot of work opportunity because I was one of the few people at the time that played traditional jazz guitar. So although I was one of the few people who did it, there was such a demand because when anybody needed this blue pick, that's the only one. There it is. So I was really fortunate, and that's how I got to record with Madonna, Ringo Starr, a lot of those pop artists who were doing jazz records. And, hey, a traditional jazz record, a guitar player, yeah, get that guy Vignola. And I'd show up with my guitar. I knew how to read, showed up on time, always, dressed well, and this is the longest my hair's ever been.
I was going to comment on that.
I'm still fearful to go to the barber, so I'm going to give that a little more time. But so that's really what it came down to. I knew from day one that I wanted to be a guitar player, and fortunately, I knew that I wanted to dedicate my life to the music of the 1930s and the 1940s. Basically, is what it comes down to. A very narrow gap. I've studied classical music. I love rock and roll. But what I really dedicate my playing life to is that era of music. I think that that era of 20s and 30s and 40s, that's America's contribution to the arts right there. The great American popular song, the Broadway play, all the music. Um, that to me was such a huge contribution to the world of the arts, and I mean, I know thousands of songs, and I'm still learning songs every couple of weeks, and I'm just fascinated at, wow, another great Richard Rodgers song. Look at that. So it's cool. I'm glad I found my passion, and I'm just so fortunate that I've been able to really make a living, without ever having to do anything else but music. I'm not saying all the gigs were Carnegie Hall. I want to tell you that right now. I've done my share of of some hardcore, gigs for $80, standing on a street in a Santa Claus outfit, playing the banjo for 7 hours in the snow, stuff like that. But that's what you do. You're looking back on it. It's better than working for a living, is what I always said to myself.
Well, let's talk a little. You talked a little bit about Django as being one of your early influence. Django and Stefan Grappelli. I know you and Bucky Pizzarelli were buds, and Johnny Frigo we had talked about a little bit earlier. Who were some of your earlier influences? Would you say that helped kind of guide us to the Frank Vignola that we see today?
Joe Pass,
Joe Pass, yeah, yeah.
Charlie Christian, Bucky Pizzarelli,
Hmm.
because my father was a tenor banjo player, so buying a record was a big deal when I was a little kid. We had the gigantic record player. It was a console, that whole thing. You would open the top, put the record on. So, if my father would come home with I'll never forget the Bucky Pizzarelli, Joe Venuti Nightwings record. I later found out that Nightwings was a name for Bucky's oldest daughter. He used to call her Nightwings because when Bucky would come home at 1 in the morning, she'd be up waiting for him every night. So
Right.
little stories like that for a guitar geek like me is pretty cool. So it was a big deal, to hear that record. So Bucky Pizzarelli, Les Paul. I remember first time putting on that Les Paul record and hearing, all those guitars, hearing Lover, How High the Moon. I was like, my goodness, what is this? And then, later on in my teens, I started to explore like Charlie Parker, Lester Young. I mean, Lester Young is jazz. There it is,
Hmm.
right there. Anything you want, modern, bebop, swing. Lester Young, that's the father of it all. That's why he was the president. So, yeah, so those are my main influences. And I want to tell you something. Getting to have played and befriended Bucky and Les Paul and Al Caiola and Tal Farlow and Charlie Bird. I mean, the list goes on and on. I can't even begin to tell you. I get goosebumps and choked up almost thinking about what a huge influence that was on me to actually play with and meet your idols growing up, listening to Les Paul, and here's the biggest name in the guitar business, and then Bucky Pizzarelli, and then I got to study with Joe Pass too when he'd come to New York. He was a grumpy guy, my goodness. He was, but wow, he'd hang out for hours. Then the next time I would see him, he would act like he didn't know who I was and walk away from me. Then the next time I would see him, Frank, how you doing?
Uh,
So it just Herb Ellis, another one. Got to play and hang with Herb Ellis. I mean, being able to sit next to these people and play with them and watch them and hear them and be right there, playing in the moment that same song and the same beat. That's so valuable. I mean, you can't learn that in a classroom. And just the idea of having an apprentice, I think that's what music learning, you need an apprentice. You need someone, and it could be someone that you've never heard of or no one's ever heard of. Like my first guitar teacher, Jimmy George. No one's ever heard of the guy, but my God, he was one of the greatest guitar players and guitar teachers that I've ever met. So it's just, and he was, he was my apprentice. I wanted to sound like him. I wanted to play the songs he played. And you kind of need that in the arts, I think, an apprentice. So I was very fortunate that I got to have the opportunity that I had. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, growing up in New York obviously gave you plenty of opportunity, from your $80 Santa Claus gigs to working in all the all the little clubs and Carnegie, even making your way to Carnegie Hall and all of this. How important was that, now that you have a chance to look back on this, how important was that in your development, just to be able to basically grind it out from the bottom all the way to the top? I mean, and I think we talked a little bit ahead of time how important that is, just building that repertoire and building that that foundation. How important was that, growing up in a city like New York City to towards your development?
Well, I think you hit the word repertoire. I knew 1,000 songs. I mean, doing all these gigs, I would literally do 10 gigs in a week, playing in Dixieland bands, playing in society orchestras. Like, we would always play the party, the reception after the opera at Lincoln Center. So at 12:30 at night, we would start playing, with the big band and the big band charts, and everybody would be in their gowns, and Pavarotti would walk in and everybody would applaud, and so just playing all of those gigs and all of those songs night after night. That's how you learn how to play. Not study. It's not studying. It's different. Practice. It's playing. You can't stop. You're with a new band. Now all of a sudden you have to learn their repertoire. And I'd go home and learn sometimes 20 songs in a week because I wanted that gig. I didn't want to have Howard Alden get the gig. I wanted the gig. You know what I mean? So you have to, have a heavy commitment. So, my point being, it was all part of the development. And there were many more good gigs than bad gigs. And even the bad gigs weren't so bad. Yeah. Actually, the worst gig was New Year's Eve, but we'll get to that if you want to hear the worst gig.
Maybe a little bit later. I think one of the resounding themes that I found through this series was exactly what you're talking about, the building blocks and paying your dues, and how important that is, and how here we are, musicians of a certain age, and we've paid our dues, so to speak, and we can look back, and if there's any kind of wisdom that we can impart on the next generation, is how important that is to pay your dues coming up. You can't get this stuff burned into your soul and understand the importance of music, the musicality, the musicianship, the getting out there and falling flat on your face and having the ability to recover from it. That just comes from being out there and doing it. And you can't do it in a studio, you can't do it in your basement. You got to be out there, and you got to be subject to criticism. And I think in my opportunity to be able to teach, that's the one thing that I try to get across to folks, is they're afraid to make a mistake. And I'm like, mistakes are great. You making a mess is fun. Have fun with it, learn from it. Chances are nobody's going to know you made a mistake. Just get out there and just do it and have fun with it. So it's really refreshing to hear all of the instructors basically saying the same thing, is, you just get out there and do it. Don't be afraid. Just get out there and do it. And the more you do it, what happens? The more confidence you get. And you're able to push the envelope a little bit more, which is really, really fun. So tell us a little bit, Frank, about this could be an open-ended question, but about your guitars. Tell us a little bit about your guitar, maybe the one that you're playing there, your favorite guitars. How do you set up your guitars, your strings? I mean, I know you're pretty low maintenance when it comes to that, man. I mean, you like the real, the raw, the rich sound, and just working with you, it's give me a microphone, let's go. So tell us a little bit about your guitars and how you set them up. And
okay, I have 5 of my, actually these are my 5 really coolest guitars here. This is a 1940s Gibson L50.
nice.
The poor man's L5. The L5 was the top of the line. All right, this is my favorite guitar. No pickup, nothing. I practice on this guitar. I just love it. Love it. Now I'm going to be 1 second. Stay with me. Stay with me. Stay with me. You're going to love this one. This is a gigantic. Hope I'm going to have to stop my video and start it again.
It's okay.
Okay. This is a 1936 Epiphone Emperor. This is the biggest guitar they made. 18-inch. Gigantic. 1936. And look at the shape this thing is. I grew up playing on this guitar.
My goodness.
Now I'm going to show you Bucky Pizzarelli's Gibson L5, which I just got from his kids. This 1933. This was Bucky's. So and look at the shape this thing is.
That is amazing.
That's the original finish from 1933. It's absolutely incredible. So, I love guitars. Let me get one more, which I really love too. Now this guitar.
That's the one I've seen before.
Yeah, this was made for me by Bob Benedetto.
Yep.
Before, this is the last guitar Bob built. There's a little, he wrote to me in Italian in there. This is the last guitar that he built before he sold his company to Fender, and then eventually to that guy in Savannah.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of a hybrid gypsy guitar. You can see in the shape, but arch top. And I don't have this guitar tuned up because I don't want to put the pressure on the neck. But he made this for me right after I got the gig with Les Paul.
Interesting.
Smart guy.
I have a friend of mine that I play with. He just got a Benedetto too, and I am just blown away by just the craftsmanship and the sound. I mean, they are just fantastic guitars.
Well, the ones made by Bob. The ones made by Bob are really special.
Yeah.
Not putting down the new companies because they are very nice guitars, but the ones that were made by Bob were really, that guy. I used to go to his house when I lived in New York City. He lived in Pennsylvania. My wife and I used to go out there to get out of the city, and I remember going to his house and his deck, I wouldn't even step on his deck. It was so perfectly beautiful and gigantic. It was like a guitar. I'm like, I can't even step on this thing. It was incredible. So his craftsmanship was just absolutely over the top.
Yeah, and it's fun to play guitars like that. It's like you almost get to the point to where, oh man, you don't want to put a scratch or a nick or anything in it, and you're super careful with it. And
yeah, well, that scratch right there, Les Paul, right, that one right there, Les Paul. First day I had it, I bring it into the gig, and he goes to get up on the stage, and it's one of those SM57 mics.
Yeah.
And boom, it went right into the top. But it was Les Paul
Les
already, you know.
Paul. What are you gonna do?
You know what he said to me? He looked up and he said, "You want me to sign it for you?"
That's awesome.
Yeah, I just laughed. It's all you know.
Yeah, it is. So, talk a little bit about your setup. Do you like high action, low action, or does it change from guitar to guitar?
It
String
changes
gauge, and
from guitar to guitar. These old guitars, I prefer a little bit of a higher action. I don't know if you can see that,
yeah,
because I do think you need a little bit of a higher action to get the wood moving. I mean, if you look at some of those videos of Freddie Green, man, that guy's action was like, you know, 3/4 of an inch off the fingerboard and to get that sound.
yeah,
So, most of my guitars I like a little bit higher than usual, than I need, just because I like to kind of dig in at times a little more.
you
I
like.
like basic guitar strings, you know, nothing
Mhm.
fancy. I don't like these coated strings, and I don't like the price tag of these coated strings either. You know, a good set of Diodarios or Labellas, you can't go wrong. You know, nickel
Yeah,
wound, that's what I use, easy.
sure, sure. I think one thing to think about certainly is as somebody starting out with being interested in guitar is like, okay, I'm going to get a guitar, but what is the next step after that for me? Well, obviously, I got to practice, and I've got to do, figure out scales and stuff, which is, we talked about earlier, which is good, but for somebody starting out, let's talk a little bit about that. So we've got this kid who's watching us now, who's interested in guitar, let's say, and he's wanting to say, okay, well, how do I get started doing this? Can we talk a little bit about what kind of advice would you give to that kid, or somebody my age for that matter, that wants to start out playing guitar? How do we get started? And maybe walk us through a couple of just real simple practice routines that we could take away from that, and just to kickstart the process. How would we go about that?
Okay, let me just get my other guitar so I have a tuned
Sure.
guitar. So I think the first step is to start thinking about learning a song. I think that's the best way to learn any genre of music, is learn songs. If you learn in rock and roll, you know, what's the thing? First thing, you learn Stairway to Heaven, or you know, you learn riffs, you learn songs. Classical music, repertoire. You jump right in the repertoire, they call it, instead of songs. No different with jazz. Blues, same thing. You learn songs. So that's what I would encourage any beginning student to really just focus on a few songs you want to learn. There's plenty of tutorials on YouTube on anything you want to learn. So find one that you can relate to, and then start, just because it's fun to play a song.
Sure.
You know, I think that's the key. That's why we want to play, because we want to play a song. And then as far as technical stuff, I think the best exercise for any level player is just playing each note on each string. 1, 2, 3, 4. Shift right up to the 12th fret. That's the chromatic scale, the 12 notes of music. All of music is made up using only 12 notes. Now that is mind-boggling if you really truly think about it. 12 notes make up all of music. Okay, and you do that on every string. I start every one of my students, whether they're beginner or super advanced, with this exercise. It's all about keeping your hand in a good position, and you're playing every note on your guitar, and you're making noise. You're making clean sound, and that's important. All right, so that's, I think, beginning steps. That's really the two things you want to focus on, is playing every note on your guitar and then starting to play a song.
It's great with YouTube and the technology that we have today. I find myself even doing that. I want to learn a new fiddle tune or something like that. I'll just bring it up on YouTube, and I'll sit down and I'll work through it and I'll play it. And it's a great resource. And I think for kids today that are starting out learning, that, like you said, you've got an online school that you teach, and that allows people the opportunity to start from square one and then all the way up to advanced guitar. But certainly that was always one of the fun things for me, learning how to play guitar, is you sit and you listen to Sweet Home Alabama or something like that. You learn those riffs, or you learn John Denver or Eagles songs were just really easy things to play. For me, learning chords, figuring out chords and then bar chords, and then just learning how all of that worked together. And it's like, and then you learn, just how I think music theory worked well for me to a certain point, and then it got to the point of, I want to try something else besides just plain music theory. How can I explore the weird in this, and the fun thing. So music theory certainly has its place, and gives you the opportunity just to learn the science of music, but
it's all in the songs. Especially in jazz, in my opinion, there's no separate theory you have to learn to play jazz.
Right.
A lot of people think, I got to learn theory if I want to play jazz. No, you learn songs. Everything's in the songs, all the theory. What I like to do is teach people songs, and as we're learning songs, I say, hey, look at that melody. That's the same thing as the Dorian mode. And boom, now they're playing it. It's like, oh yeah. So I think you have to, integrate theory into the songs, as opposed to have a separation. Like you said, if you just learn theory, it's boring. Who just wants to play scales? I mean, I want to play a melody. And then you can put the scale into the melody.
How important is it for you, and I kind of know the answer to this question, but how important is it to you, to the difference between being paper trained dots versus being ear trained? I have found that a lot of classical musicians that I play with that are paper trained are, when you ask them, improvise or to play something here, they're completely lost. What do you want me to do? Well, just come up with something here. I have learned over the years that while I read music not very well, but I can read it, I find that if I can connect to a song and I learn it through here to come out, through my ears, then I can own that song a lot better, and I'm more ingrained. Being a percussionist, I will never write a chart down. I just sit, I will memorize, I will learn the song, and then that way I can play it, and I can allow that to work through me, listen to what the song is doing with the band, and to be able to adjust accordingly. And I know guitar players are that way, but what is your opinion on the importance of learning by ear, and how does it play into the way that you teach?
Well, first of all, I think it's, improvising and learning or owning or internalizing a song are kind of two separate things. Like Segovia, this guy owns Bach, my goodness, and he could sit there and play it for 5 hours straight, every piece in the world, just unbelievable. Glenn Gould used to practice Bach, get up, walk around the room singing it, come back to the piano and pick it up where he was singing it after he walked in the room. So that to me is internalizing a piece. Improvising is you know, I don't even know if it's something you could really learn. I just think it's something you can learn. I shouldn't say that. I think the key is being able to play what you hear, number one. And then number two is being able to learn the vocabulary necessary in order to play ideas you're hearing, say a jazz lick. You know, you need a certain amount of language skills to speak a language. If you're going to play in a bebop band, you better have some bebop language going on.
Sure.
If you want to play in a bluegrass band, you better have some bluegrass chops going on.
Sure.
I don't, it sounds like crabgrass when I play bluegrass. As great of a guitar player as I am, it's not, it's a stylistic thing. So it's a very good question. And I do think, a great thing is just to pick out melodies you're hearing. And again, I say some people I've taught are tone deaf, to be completely honest with you. You ask them to go la, and they go, they can't get the pitch. There's something in there. But yet, you put a piece of music in front of them and they could read Mozart or Vivaldi, like you're saying. It's that paper musician. It's a great question. I do think if you want to learn how to play jazz, and that's my specialty, so I could really only speak about that. If you want to learn how to play jazz, you do have to develop your ear. You do have to be able to put on a record and pick out a melody of a song. You do have to be able to sing a melody while you're playing chords, no matter how bad your voice is. Ba-boo-doo, ba-da-da-doo-doo-doo. Now, if you could sing that, you could ba-boo-doo. You'll figure out where the notes are. Okay, so that kind of training is very important if you want to learn how to play jazz. If you want to learn how to play classical music and be in an orchestra, I don't know if that's so important to be able to, pick out a melody by putting on a record more important than, sitting down and reading 90 pages of someone goes like that with ink, it looks like. You know what I mean? Just notes everywhere, rhythms.
Yeah.
6/8, 9/8, cues for the conductor, and that's a lot to do too. I can't do that, but I could play the blues for 10 minutes straight without any music. So yeah. I don't know. It's a great question, Scott. I don't even know if that's an answer, but those are just my thoughts.
Well, something that you touched on, and I want to kind of go back to the groove yard here just for a second. Last time that I saw you and Vinny here in Indiana, we're talking about that language. That
Where was that, by the way?
It was a battleground.
Oh, was that the rain?
Yeah, in the rain.
Oh,
Yeah. We had that Greg, the banjo player, up there playing the and the fiddle player from Sweden that was up there with you. Yeah.
Right. I remember.
Yeah, there's a real nice YouTube video of you guys out there with that. But
pouring rain, right? We were under.
Oh, it was just awful. And you guys had your suits on and the white shoes, and you were spotless, man. And I'm just like, look at those cats.
After that show, I tell you that.
Well, what was fun about that is watching you guys. I mean, you threw down Tico, and I'm sitting there watching you and Vinny just volleying back and forth on this, and just that language that you're talking, and just watching you smile at each other, and just, I mean, you'd lay it down, then Vinny would lay it down, and that's what we're talking. You just can't teach that. You've got to be able to feel that. You got to be able to go into that arsenal and pull out something that maybe you don't even know. Yeah.
That comes from all of those gigs.
Yep.
We talked about earlier.
Sure.
When I got my Tico chops together, I used to play at a diner, a Long Island diner, every, I think 3 or 4 days a week for lunch, 12 to 2. And I'd get some cash and I'd get lunch. And that's where my guitar teacher at the time taught me Tico. I got lunch, I got money, And I also got to practice Tico Tico. So, 30 years later, here we are in Battleground, Indiana, having a ball playing it. You
Yeah.
don't
Now,
get to that point unless you've done all of those gigs, and the chops of playing in the snow. Playing in a rainstorm is like, no problem, sure. You do what you got to do. It's
we had a
we had a
blast.
blackout once. We had a blackout in Italy, right in the middle of the show. Beautiful old theater, must have been 1,000 years old. So we walked into the aisle and we started playing. And since it was a beautiful old theater, no one had a problem hearing us. It was great.
That's awesome. No, that was one of those memorable moments that we just kind of walked away from that, and I will never forget that. That was so sweet. Well, talking about touring, you have a pretty heavy touring schedule before all of the COVID hit stuff. I mean, you would be on the road a lot. I know you tour heavily. You've got PBS specials that I know you've done throughout the years, and which are fantastic. And anybody that has an opportunity to check out some of Frank's PBS specials, they're amazing. But I mean, you've linked up with so many great artists. We're talking Bucky, Tommy Emmanuel, folks like that. Talk a little bit about how being a road musician and what kind of impact that has on you as far as your practice repertoire, or what do you need to do to keep yourself fresh, not getting into the same rut every night after night after night being on the road, because it's like, oh, we're doing the same show. And I mean, we've all been there, it's just like, oh, okay, you start out the first 5 songs are the same 5 songs you start out every show. How do you avoid getting into getting into a rut and keeping things fresh when you're on the road?
Well, Vinny and I kind of pride ourselves on our arrangements. We have hundreds of just intense arrangements. So although we did play the same show basically every night, it was always just getting up for being able to pull off those arrangements, because that was some intense stuff we used to play.
I know.
The other, and how we would get there is, to me, if you're going to tour, you have to tour. You have to be out there as much as you possibly can in order to get that intensity every night. And there's no substitute for practice, as they say. So when you're out there touring, you want to do that every night. You want to do that 200 times a year. That's the way you get to your peak. In my humble opinion, this is. I've tried, 50 dates a year, 20 dates a year, being a big shot, but you know what? You don't keep your show chops up.
Yeah.
Your show chops aren't there. If you're not out there with the same band, like Vinny and I call it a band, but it's just 2 guys. But man, we get out there and we do sometimes 30 shows in 35 nights. And by the end of those nights, we're like, I could play anything I want to, So there's a trade-off with everything, because I have a family. I have 4 kids. I have a dog. A Great Dane, for God's sakes. So, the trade-off is you don't get to be home.
Right.
Again, I've tried both ways. When I tour in the future, it's going to be, you got to do it 100%. Take all the gigs within reason, obviously.
Right.
But we're in such demand that we could do 300 top-notch shows a year throughout the world. I mean, obviously, I'm talking pre-COVID, and who knows what's going to happen in the future. So
Right.
I'm talking almost in the past.
Yeah.
Now, there was a time where I took 18 months off because I had a very bad accident.
That was the very next thing that I had written down here in 2017.
Go ahead.
Well, I knew you had.
Because it has to do with the touring. When I took all that time off,
Yeah.
it was the first time that I ever was in one spot for more than 2 weeks.
Yeah, in 2017 you had an ATV crash. And broke
Put it in
stuff.
Bible.
Yeah, so talk
Trees,
to
trees don't move. Let's
Yeah.
put it.
Talk a little bit about that and the process from when you were in the hospital to what did you do to rehab yourself to get back up to your standard of excellence here. Walk us through that process.
The first thing I did when I realized that I was going to live, because the first step for me was just staying alive. Because I hit a tree, I broke 8 bones, lungs collapsed, bleeding internally. So that's a very bad position to be in. So they flew me to a trauma center, and the first thing they did was put the tubes in me to drain the blood and get my lungs going. I was a mess. So when I first realized that, let's put it this way, I didn't realize my arm was broken until like 2 days after this accident. And then they finally said, hey, we think your arm's broken too. It ends up I had to have 4 surgeries and a big plate. My hand basically shakes and hurts except when I play guitar. So talk about getting lucky and having a great surgeon who knew his patient. I hit the jackpot. So once I realized I was going to live, I said, okay, I'm going to have to heal. I didn't want any pressure. So I decided to cancel everything and give myself 18 months. Why 18 months? Django, when he was in the fire, took him 18 months to recover. Les Paul, when he was in his accident and he was in a snowbank for 8 hours with a broken arm, 18 months to recover. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go with that number. So I took the time off. I stayed home. I didn't get depressed. I didn't take one oxycodone pill because I was scared to death of getting addicted. I felt the pain every day. I practiced every day, even though I could only do this for about 4 months. And at the end of it, I was like, wow, okay. You'll notice in any videos that I have a beard. That was my recovery period. When the beard came off, I fully healed. I felt like I was 100%. And that's when I started booking work again. And the last tour we did before COVID, we were in Hawaii, we did Sweden, we did probably 45 top-notch shows before COVID hit. And I felt like and especially myself, I was at the top of my game. It took really 3 years to recover fully from that accident. And anybody who experiences anything like that, who has to recover from something, attitude is everything.
Yeah,
like I
I
said,
agree.
I really kept a positive attitude. I was hurting. I would cry sometimes when I'd wake up because I'd be in so much pain. But I was like, all right, now I'm going to go and let me put on YouTube on the big screen TV and watch Leonard Bernstein conduct Tchaikovsky because I have nothing to do today. And man, by the end of it, I was like, I felt great. I was like, oh, good. Let me get over and make myself a peanut butter sandwich.
Yeah.
So it's all in the attitude. I tried to look at it as a study period. I studied the music of Charlie Parker like crazy. I got my educational website together, which now houses over 1,500 unique education videos. It has hundreds of songs I teach. It's a very active, subscription-based website. I'm on there every day answering questions, playing guitar. So all of those things lead to today, and I feel like I'm in better shape than I ever have been, both in mind and in body. I feel like my guitar playing is like really, really good. I feel real comfortable. I can hardly wait to get back to playing shows. I don't want it to be premature. I want everybody to feel safe. I want to feel safe.
Sure.
And when it's time, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to play 200 shows again in a year. I know it, and I'm going to look forward to every day because I love waking up on the road and being like, oh, great, we're playing San Francisco tonight, the Herbst Theater. Great. Get up, practice with Vinny a little bit, have some dinner, and next thing you know, you're on your way to Sacramento to the
Well, I would love
next
to.
series.
I would love to get you at our festival next September at Ouibache. It's a roots music festival. The one
DeVito.
sponsoring this thing. Man, I would love to see you and Vinny, and that would be a lot of fun. Well, a couple of other questions here, and then I'm going to ask you just to serenade us here for maybe a few minutes and dazzle us with some guitar wizardry here. But we talked about the suit and tie. We talked about the impression that you give and how important it is to put your best effort into your craft and believing what it is that you're doing. You and Vinny are always you're looking like $1 million in your suits and your shoes and everything. You go up there and you deliver. It's all part of the commitment to excellence. And I think as we, the keepers of the music right now is what I call us, it's important for us to be able to take that message to the next generation and say, if you're going to do something, do it well and do it with excellence. Learn it well, and because eventually you're going to be the ones who are the keepers of the music, and you're going to have to be passing that on. So as a teacher, and I know the answer to this question, the importance of passing this music on with excellence and with integrity seems to be something that is really, I feel, lacking in our education system and just music education in general. If you really want a decent education, you got to dig deep and you got to pay big bucks for this kind of stuff to get the understanding of the importance of excellence and integrity. How important is that to you?
Well, obviously, when you commit your life to something, you better be passionate about it. And if showing up on time is half the battle in our business.
No kidding.
I mean, I would think it would be in any business. If you have a meeting, right, and how many doors do we knock on, and we hear no, 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 and then we get a yes, and then we hear no, 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 and you keep knocking, you keep knocking. I mean, thank God I'm at the point I don't really have to knock on doors anymore, but you got to look good. If you're going to have a meeting and, hey, I'll meet you at 11 o'clock for lunch, I was always there at 10:30 parked in the car waiting because I don't want to be late. What a great way to blow a gig, be late. I mean, think about it. I was so conscientious about being to work on time that I would get a flat tire and change it and still be the first one at the gig. So that's how important it is. As far as, the dressing up, first of all, my suit is cheap but effective.
Well played.
But, that it comes from that period of music too, like working with Bucky, having to be in a really nice tuxedo when you show up to play with the New York Pops or the
Sure.
Boston Pops. You don't show up in your t-shirt. I guess, if you're a big star, you could get away with it. But even like, when I've worked with big stars, man, even at sound check, they would show up and just look like, wow, have such a presence.
Sure.
And I think that's very, very important. Again, in any business, but especially in the music business, to be on time, to be prepared musically. If it's your
Yeah.
own gig, if it's you're playing in someone's band and you're supposed to know your parts, know your parts. There's no excuse for not knowing your parts. If you don't know your parts, you're not going to get the call to get the gig back.
Sure.
I can assure you that. And there goes your career, one gig at a time. Every gig should lead to another gig. That's what I tell students all the time. You're playing someplace, and I remember playing in Wichita, Kansas once at a Tuesday night jazz night at the Ramada Inn. There were, maybe 8 people there. And, paid $200 and we got the night's room. So Tuesday night on the road, great, perfect. And sure enough, we played our hearts out. We really sounded good that night. The Wichita Jazz Society people were the 8 people table, and they hired us for like $3,000, $5,000 gigs in the future years.
You
I
never
always
know.
tell that story because, we could have been like, oh, this stinks, not worn our suits, and showed up, nonchalant, oh, hotel, Tuesday night, no one's here. Would those people have been impressed enough to give us the gig? No. So that's what I mean is like every gig leads to another gig. It should anyway. If your attitude is right, you always have a smile. You don't have to like the people you work with. Some people I don't like that I play, that I work for. And Vinny and I do our thing, smiles, we get in the car, we're driving away, that guy, and then we let it out a little bit. But that's very rare. But the point is, you always have to keep that nice smiley face on. Bucky Pizzarelli was the master of that.
He was
You know what?
amazing.
Backstage at shows, whether it's a festival or a concert or a club, you know who's the one sitting there near the stage all night? Bucky Pizzarelli, saying hi to everybody, and that's the place to be. You don't want to be hiding in the corner somewhere. You want to be out there meeting everybody. You got to be a people person.
I learned a
Go
lot.
back to your hotel room, then you shut the door and you don't talk to anybody.
There you go. I learned a lot of that from our friend Johnny Frigo. Johnny was he was always there in a suit. He was always on time. He was always
signing CDs.
And he was always, and I have a picture of him and my son Noah. And Noah was probably about 5 or 6 years old, and Johnny's hands are just cupped around his face, and it's just the sweetest picture that you could have, and I will cherish that forever. And
Les Paul, one of the first things I noticed working with him was, and he was just getting out of an 8-week hospital stay when I started working with him. I subbed for him for those 8 weeks, and then I stayed on when he came back with his group. And man, he was tired, but at the end of the show, he would have 100 people lined up, and he would stand there and talk to everybody, and he would come to life. It would give him energy. He would sign pick guards and this and that, and you're from Chicago, Johnny Frigo, and everybody. So I was like, what a lesson, because here's a guy who at 85 should go home and get rest, but no, he was with his fans. I was like, boy, that's my philosophy from now on. You sit there until the last person is done, and then you go back your guitar up. I love it.
I love it. Well, we got just a few more minutes, and I would love for everyone just to get a sampling of your guitar playing here. And why don't we take the next few minutes and just dazzle us with something here, and we'll just sit back and shut up and listen.
Okay. You might hear my dog barking in the back.
And that's okay. Mine's right here.
I gotta practice.
Well,
Oh,
Frank,
I'm so out of shape, Scott. I'm so out
that's
of shape. That's
you
what I
did
mean about
that.
performing.
You
I
did that
play
just
every
for me.
day, but the performing, that's why you gotta get
Yeah.
on the road and play shows.
That's right. And you did that for me, man. Thank you. I appreciate it. Ah, that was
But it's
great.
still fun. It's still so much fun. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
having me for this.
Well, Frank, it's been a treat. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time, but I just want to tell everybody how they can get in touch with you and get if they're interested in your online classes. Tell us how to do that.
Well, frankvignola.com, or just send me an email, frankvignolaguitar@gmail.com. That's the easiest way. I can send you links. If you want some lead sheets, if you want a chord melody arrangement, a couple of scales to work on, I'll send you PDFs, anything you need, no problem. I
All
like to
right.
share all the work. So,
I love it. Well, Frank, thank you so much, and thanks to everybody that
all right,
got to join us here. I will be in touch soon, and we're actually going to start putting Ouibache 2021 together. So I would love to talk to you about that, man,
great, no
and
problem. I'd love it.
it would be a lot of fun. So we're going to sign off, and thank you very much, and
Okay,
we'll be in touch.
thanks, Scott.
All right,
Bye
bye,
bye.
Frank.